Obesity is the number one driver of chronic disease. 50% of our adult population are obese or overweight, and it drives about 50% of healthcare costs in this country.
Well, RFK Jr. is very much concerned with the rate of obesity here in the United States, and to be sure, it's a real problem. But while many health officials believe that almost 50% of American adults suffer from obesity, it turns out that calls to measure weight differently could actually identify a higher percentage of American adults as obese, as high as 75%. But is it accurate? Is this new method of measuring weight an accurate way of determining obesity? Now, this is all about changing how obesity is determined. So far, doctors have used something known as body mass index or BMI. And I think most people understand that it's not the best way to determine whether or not someone is overweight or obese, because you just basically divide your weight with your height. So it's an easy and inexpensive way of measuring weight or overweight or obesity, but it has drawbacks. For instance, it does not account for body type. It also doesn't account for muscle mass or bone density, which obviously is going to lead to higher weight, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to, translate to being overweight or obese. And BMI also doesn't indicate where in the body someone is carrying weight, and that actually does matter. Where you're carrying fat matters in regard to your health, which leads us to the new way in which health officials want to determine whether or not individuals are overweight or obese. The Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology Commission proposed a revised obesity definition that included waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, and waist to height ratio. So the idea is to further account for fat distribution and aid in differentiation between muscle and fat mass. I just don't know if this is necessarily going to be the better way of measuring whether or not someone is overweight or obese. And based on this way of determining it, health officials believe that the formula will indicate that 75% of American adults are overweight, or I'm sorry, obese, not overweight, obese, which I think is crazy. I don't think 75% of Americans are obese, but I'm curious what you think, Cenk.
First of all, there isn't any story we can't make political, but it really is political, right? Because I think this is a lot of the pharmaceutical industrial complex. They need you to think that you're in disastrous shape, so you buy their products. This is marketing 101, right? Oh my God, you're missing the coolest, latest pants. If you don't have those pants, you're not cool at all. Oh my God, you don't have these sneakers? That means you can't jump that high. That means you can't play basketball that well. That means you're not cool. So now when it comes to drugs, you're all obese. So 3/4 of you are tubby and terrible. You need to take these drugs to make sure that you lose that weight. Otherwise you should feel terrible about yourself. So look, RFK Jr. was supposed to go and make us healthier. Where's his attack on processed foods? Gone. Big Food didn't want it, right? High fructose corn syrup, gone. I can go down the list. How about the drug companies? We still are forced to pay whatever prices they want us to pay, et cetera. We didn't get anything good out of it. In fact, now we're gonna get this nonsense where all Americans are gonna be made to feel terrible about themselves, so you buy more junk to combat it.
Well, hold on, I gotta jump in real quick. I mean, look, this could just be a coincidence, and I'm speculating here, so I wanna be clear about that. But the timing of this new way of determining whether or not someone is obese comes on the heels of this explosion of the GLP-1 injections, right? Things like Ozempic or Wegovy. And I do wonder if this is a way of increasing the number of Americans who are considered obese in order to justify prescribing those drugs to them. I mean, again, just speculation, but there's gotta be a better way of doing this, because look, the issue that I have is there are all sorts of body types, right? There are people who are apple shaped, there are people who are pear shaped. And so someone like me, if I let myself go, for lack of a better way of describing it, I have an apple shaped body, right? And so I don't have a tiny waist, but I'm also and my hips aren't huge. And so my hip to waist ratio would probably indicate that I'm overweight, which is insane because I'm not. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to account for different body types and you have to have a better measure of fat versus muscle. I agree that BMI is not the best way of determining whether or not someone is overweight or obese, but I also don't want to rely heavily on body type. I think that there should be a more precise way of determining whether someone's obese.
Okay, I mean, I have high BMI, but that's obviously because of my muscle mass and the densest bones you've ever seen. But these days, I'm even getting Ozempic shamed. Like, why haven't you taken Ozempic yet? Okay, so there's a lot of that going around. Guys, bottom line is, look, stay healthy, try to eat good food for you. It makes a difference to be healthy, so we're not dismissing it altogether. But don't buy into the hype that you're all obese or morbidly obese. Makes it sound like you're gonna explode any second. So you better do X, Y, Z, and most importantly, buy X, Y, and Z. Eat healthy, stay away from processed foods, do the best you can. Yes, I'm not the best spokesperson for that. Nevertheless, that's the obviously logical thing to do instead of hating yourself over this nonsense that they're shoving down your throat, kind of literally. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.